All right. So let's talk about change criminal records, and the law and the application of the law fairly. All right. And public participation. So, for example, all right, when did my legal problems start? My legal problems started when I was a teenager. Why did my legal problems start? Because when I was a teenager, I shoplifted. Why don't you see a criminal record? Because juveniles also have criminal records. It's called Juvenile Detention Center. All right. Okay, so if that's the case, how's that a criminal record? Ultimately, juvenile criminal records do not show on a person that's an adult. All right. And ultimately, we are talking legally a adult. All right. So attempting to relitigate and re-prosecute after the person is an adult, yeah, just to go ahead and try to make sure that they couldn't escape their record, not legal. Especially if the basis of attempting to try to paint the narrative to relitigate, despite the factor of the adjudication being dismissed with prejudice, meaning not being capable of being filed in a court of law and retried, then ultimately, that whole, you know, um, disposition adjudication, it's not what you would end up going ahead and thinking or working the way that it does. Because, for example, the instance that I lived, me, when I was in court, as a teenager, it was family court. It was this program called Persons in Need of Supervision. All right. Ultimately, they had ordered me to community service. I did my community service. They ordered me to a group home. I stayed at the group home as long as I was mandated there. All right. Did my time. Was done with it. Relocate to North Carolina. Apparently, somebody decides that it's a good idea to try to, weaponize law enforcement. I end up getting racially profiled, which law enforcement wanted to go ahead and try to avoid having to take accountability for, and acting like, just because somebody clarifies about the level of the assault that they went through while simultaneously being mocked, of like, oh, just take it to the chin. You take it to the chin if you were a man, quote unquote. And also, there's no proof of the abuse or the assault that you suffered. And also pretty much the arrogance of, I can get away with doing this, my position of power that I'm abusing, because ultimately it's your word against mine, and you have no way to be able to substantiate the factor that you've suffered physical damages. I'm pretty sure the x-ray that would go ahead and show that, you see the crease there? Yeah, bottom jaw. Yeah. So, this side of my face right here, it being swollen, yeah, that's because the jaw is shattered there. All right, right above the teeth, from getting the teeth knocked in. That whole factor. Not to mention that, but jaw's not aligned right anymore. All right. High torque hit right to the face. You know, quite a few of them. Establishing which one directly was the one that ended up doing that would be more difficult. What would be able to establish a timeline? Police reports, because people wanted to not stop picking up the phone and weaponizing 911 in an attempt to try to use law enforcement as the weapon to harass me, to try to avoid legal culpability of having to face harassment charges. So, that being said, just because somebody else feels that you got off too easy. All right, you got off too easy because they wanted to determine the sentence or how long that you should have to stew in, you know, having to mull over your decisions and the consequences of your actions and the implications that it could have. Does not mean that that is legally the case or legally acceptable. All right. So let's say, for example, when I was a kid, I shoplifted. Even the sentence that I ended up getting, as far as that ended up going, was extreme. I had to go ahead and be in that group home for 9 months, while at the same time, the amount of hours that I ended up doing in community service ended up equating to, I was doing a year and a half of community service and also completed successfully a year of probation. No, that's right. That was actually 4 years of probation because the probation started at 12. So 12, 13, 14, 15. The probation and the group home ended simultaneously. But still, my point on that is, that was the point where cops started harassing me because my mom wouldn't stop saying, it upset me that this person did this. I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling the cops. You either need to talk to the cops or get the fuck out of my house. Thinking that, well, I was not legally capable of being able to form any type of foundation or, stability for myself because of the limitations that the added gatekeeping caused. Basically, when it comes down to it, the reason why there is double jeopardy laws is because of the factor that ultimately it's like, oh, you're upset somebody got a short time, and for you, you feel like they should be in there longer. If you feel that you deserve to determine their placement more than they do, or the heaviness or severity of, the impact of what they ended up doing to cause them to be entangled and intertwined in the legal system in the first place, then please, whatever the difference is of what you feel that the punishment should be and the sentence, you go ahead and you stand in for them. You go ahead and do it for them. But if you are not going to accept the punishment while still feeling that your opinion of they got off too easy should go ahead and be respected, well, you're not the one actually serving the sentence, then you need to keep your opinion to yourself. Especially because to end up going ahead, so literally, for the same infraction, all right? I ended up, as a teenager, and keep in mind, I didn't even get to plead, I didn't even get to speak. That's the reason the prosecutorial misconduct ended up happening in North Carolina. Literally, it was for the same crime. All right. Shoplifted as a teenager. Ended up going ahead and doing 4 years of probation. 9 months at a group home. Court mandated. Keep in mind, it was a family court. All right. Ended up going ahead and doing that. Ended up then moving later on. After I ended up moving, didn't get an opportunity to speak. Basically got held in contempt of court while simultaneously not even getting to submit a plea. All right. Ended up being released on, no contest time served, which meant the issue was supposed to be a dead issue then and there. We are talking retroactively over a decade ago. All right. To then have somebody, because they felt I got off too easy, take the liberty of smashing their fucking car into my fucking car while spreading the rumor that I was driving drunk. Well, anybody that actually fucking knows me on a deeper level knows that I've known plenty of assholes in my life. Alright? I've known a few people that have ended up dying because of drunk driving. I've known people that it ended up being a wasted potential situation, you know? And basically, one decision instantaneously that they felt, oh, this risk, what's the harm in it? They endangered themselves. They ended up endangering everybody on the road with them. They ended up going ahead and proving the fact that they have no capacity for impulse control. Because if they had capacity for impulse control, they would understand going and driving drunk is an impulsive decision, with the exception of a emergency. Like, for example, a medical emergency. In a medical emergency, you go ahead and you call the proper authorities. You call 911. You ask for an ambulance to be sent. They'll go ahead and they'll do the driving for you. They're essentially a medical taxi. A medical taxi that is not allowed to price gouge you, might I add. Alright, so that being said, so to go ahead and spread rumors, try to make it seem like I'm a drunk and all that, to use as a pretext to try to charge for a DWI charge, that then wanted to go ahead and try to, we'll bargain it down to a speeding ticket. Yeah, the damage showed that the person ended up hitting me going 50 to 30, which technically means that what they ended up doing was reckless endangerment, as well as attempted vehicular manslaughter because of the factor of not being in motion at the time of impact, while simultaneously there was no field sobriety test, enacted. I actually did not resist in any which way, shape, or form, when asked to go to the hospital to, be able to go for a blood test. So that way my blood alcohol level could go ahead and be tested. Like, full compliance. Alright? Now keep in mind, I was not the one who caused the accident. I was literally the person who got rammed into. Alright? While simultaneously, because of wanting to set a court date for a situation that shouldn't have happened, well, also, the opposition wants to go ahead and claim that there was no racial connotations to come along with it. Alright? Yet, meantime, it states that the reason for the suspension of the license is for a failure to appear. Keep in mind, I've been talking about the factor that I had been racially profiled, I had been racially targeted, nobody wanted to hear me, and ultimately people wanted to act like there is no excuse that you had to not be able to show up for the court date. First of all, I was counties away. Second of all, it was during the holiday times. Third of all, you ended up going ahead and setting my court date during fucking Hanukkah. Alright? Literally, the courts are not even supposed to be open on the day that you wanted to set as the date for the court date, while simultaneously wanting to go ahead and claim that I failed to appear. Why the fuck would I appear on a date that the court would be closed anyway? And what right would you have to deem and call for a failure to appear for a court date when meantime the courts were not even open to deliberate on the matter in the first place? This is all shit that you gotta go ahead and argue, So, ultimately, for anybody paying attention that my legal situation, they've taken it personal. You go right ahead. But I just clarified the legal chain, not to mention that. But prior is to establish a pattern of behavior. Yeah, the courts are not going to go ahead and look at a juvenile record that was supposed to have been expunged and sealed, as deemed and ordered by the court, to go ahead and attempt to redeliberate in an attempt to call it an appeal, to go ahead and prevent from you having to go ahead and prove how your predatory charging practices and price gouging, and attempted economic warfare did not end up constituting as tortious interference, in an attempt to cause intentional financial damages. That's going to be a fucking tough fight to be able to prove without having to go ahead and blast financial statements, all over all over a screen for the entire community to be able to go ahead and witness. So, I mean, ultimately, when it comes to the whole court situation, it's like, hey, I really have no problem showing up. Not to mention that, but ultimately, what people weren't there for? That there's this thing the courts have called technology, and they have programs to be able to go ahead and witness things on cameras and go ahead and hear out the points being made, that those points being made and studied based on a legal grounding and basis end up going ahead and equaling what would be submitted in a deposition that ends up leading to the discovery phase of the actual trial, Oh, and by the way, the whole speedy trial factor ended up getting ignored, ultimately considering it an extended stop without having to go ahead and, you know, have to explain how elongated detainment wasn't a breach of my constitutional rights. You know? I mean, ultimately telling me, don't leave town. I have the right to be able to leave town. What right you have to tell me to not leave town? That I'm wondering about. You know? Ultimately, too. If the court's not going to go ahead and actually get shit in motion to, be able to argue the merits on the basis, with, keep in mind, hearsay or the gossip mill or the streets are saying, all right, when you do that, when the person ends up having a court date and you are going ahead and spreading rumors, well, at the same time, people in the past that have gone to test that theory ended up going ahead and learned, yeah, no, it was unsubstantiated. Like, they were getting just drugged through the fucking mud. That right there would meet the threshold of defamation of character. All right? So, ultimately, that is a civil tort. But going ahead and trying to spread rumors, going ahead and trying to disseminate misinformation about the situation, in an attempt to mince words, in an attempt to sway the public perception. Yeah, ultimately, that could be argued in front of a judge, especially if the judge ends up going ahead and knowing the rumors. Ultimately, that could actually be perceived as an attempt to go ahead and sway a jury. That right there is the definition of either witness tampering or witness intimidation. You may be trying to intimidate from a distance. Your attempt may have failed. But still, took a shot. Shot didn't work out. Now the point being made. What fucking right you have to go ahead and ask and expect so much of me while offering me nothing in return and expecting that I should bend a knee and bow down to the power of your opinion. So what the fuck do you have to tell me what the fuck to do? What fucking right do you have to tell me how to live my life? What fucking right do you have to tell me of who to love as long as it's legal? What fucking right do you have to tell me whether if I should be into guys, into girls? What fucking right do you have to tell me on what I should be able to dress, what I shouldn't be able to dress? What fucking right do you have to tell me that I don't have rights to be able to get tattoos, to be able to get piercings just because you don't like them and you believe that it makes society view me like I am a derelict, trashy piece of shit? Those opinions, that reflection, painted out like that, yeah, I don't understand why the fuck I should have to go ahead and fit the bill for your shortcomings. When you got an answer of what logic that's based on, except the, logic of entitlement, you go ahead and present those reasons. I'm here, I'm listening.